In 1969, Bedford Trucks ruled every road, from Africa to Asia. They were the standard. They were the trusted choice. By 1986, the factory gates closed forever. Mercedes didn't buy them. Mercedes didn't merge with them. Mercedes simply out-engineered them so completely that Bedford became irrelevant. This is how a German company destroyed a British legend. Bedford was born in 1932. General Motors opened a factory in Luton and called it Bedford. From that moment forward, Bedford became the backbone of British transportation. The S-Type arrived in the 1950s. Called the Big Bedfords, they brought confidence. Drivers loved them. The RL military version became iconic, used by the British Army for decades. The Green Goddess fire engine variant served British emergency services until 2004. Bedford wasn't just making trucks, they were making British engineering heritage. In 1959, Bedford released the TK. This truck defined a generation. It was the quintessential light truck of the 1960s and 1970s. Simple, reliable, affordable. Everywhere you looked on British roads, a TK was working. The Bedford TK competed directly with the Ford D series and Bedford was winning. But Bedford never updated it fundamentally. They sold the TK, then the MK variant, then the TL with minor cosmetic changes. For nearly 25 years, the same basic 1959 design remained in production. No clean sheet redesign, no major innovation, just cosmetic updates and badge changes. By 1969, Finland's truck registry showed 8,789 registered Bedford trucks. Mercedes was second with only 6,800. Bedford dominated. They had become more than a manufacturer. They were the standard against which all other trucks were measured. The company kept expanding. The KM came for heavier duty applications. The TM arrived in the mid-1970s, reaching up to 42 tons payload. But the TM was the beginning of the end. It used Detroit diesel, 6 V71 and 8 V71 two-stroke engines. These were incredibly loud, thirsty and unpopular with European drivers. The Mercedes NG, meanwhile, featured sophisticated, quiet four-stroke engines with superior fuel efficiency. The TM failed to penetrate the European market. Bedford remained stuck as a light truck maker. They had no competitive heavy-duty design for the advancing market. Nobody imagined this would end. Bedford was British engineering at its finest, solid, reliable, trusted. For nearly 50 years they owned the truck market. Then everything changed. October 1973, an Arab oil embargo shocked the world. Gas prices tripled overnight. The oil crisis hit every truck manufacturer, but it hit Britain hardest. The British truck market contracted. American truck sales collapsed. Manufacturers that depended on domestic markets suddenly faced recession. Bedford felt the pressure immediately. Profits declined. Orders dropped. The company that had seemed invincible suddenly looked vulnerable. General Motors noticed. The parent company began questioning its investment in British trucks. Was Bedford still profitable? Could it compete against newer designs emerging from Europe? GM started looking for options. Could they acquire British Leyland's truck division? Could they consolidate and survive? The problem was deeper than the oil crisis. Bedford's newest design was still the TK from 1959. That was 14 years old in 1973. The TK was outdated. It still worked. Customers still bought them because they were cheap and simple. But the truck industry was moving forward. Other manufacturers were investing in new designs, better aerodynamics, more efficient engines, better driver comfort. Bedford was standing still. While Bedford struggled, Mercedes-Benz was on the move. In 1968, Mercedes acquired Krupp's commercial vehicle sales company. In 1969, they purchased Hanomag Henschel, gaining manufacturing facilities in Kassel, Bremen, and Hamburg-Harburg. This wasn't random expansion. This was strategic domination. Mercedes was building an empire. In 1965, Mercedes opened a state-of-the-art truck factory at Wörth in Rhineland-Palatinate. This plant was cutting edge. It would become the foundation of Mercedes' global truck business. The company invested heavily in engineering, research and development. Every truck was designed to be better than the last. In 1973, Mercedes launched the new generation series. The NG represented a complete engineering overhaul. It featured modular design that covered both medium and heavy-duty weight classes with the same basic platform. This meant efficiency in production and flexibility in applications. European regulations had changed. Length restrictions on roads favoured cab-over designs. Mercedes understood this. They designed trucks that worked within regulations while maximising cargo space and driver comfort. The NG was revolutionary. It had powerful engines, V8s with 18.3 litre displacement, producing 352 horsepower. These engines were calculated precisely. Italian regulations required 8 horsepower per tonne. With 44-tonne maximum gross weight, that meant 352 horsepower. Mercedes didn't just meet the requirement, they engineered it to perfection. By 1977, Mercedes acquired Euclid from White Motor Corporation, but they sold it to VME Group just a few years later in 1984. It wasn't a permanent addition to their empire. In 1981, they purchased Freightliner, the largest truck manufacturer in America. This was the decisive move. Freightliner meant Mercedes controlled North America. They weren't just making trucks anymore. They were buying their competitors. They were becoming a global powerhouse. By the late 1970s, Volvo had surpassed Bedford. Scania had surpassed Bedford. Mercedes followed. The company that had dominated in 1969 was no longer top choice. In the UK specifically, Volvo and Scania captured the premium long-haul market. DAF took the middle market. Mercedes was the global winner, but the local winners in Britain were the Scandinavians. Bedford's response was the TL in 1980. It was supposed to be an update, modern exterior, better cab, improved comfort, but the TL was a cosmetic refresh, not a real innovation. It was like putting new paint on an old foundation. Drivers weren't interested. The TL never matched the TK's success. It arrived too late and offered too little. The real difference wasn't just design, it was technology. In 1981, Mercedes pioneered ABS, anti-lock brake system, for heavy-duty commercial vehicles. This was revolutionary safety technology. Bedford didn't have it. Mercedes did. The Mercedes NG80, introduced in 1980, featured revamped engines with advanced fuel systems. Electronic controls were beginning to appear. Efficiency improved. Drivers reported better fuel economy. The trucks lasted longer. Reliability increased. Bedford trucks remained mechanical. Simple lever controls. Basic engine management. They were easy to repair, which was good for developing countries. But in developed markets, drivers wanted modern technology, better ergonomics, superior safety features. Mercedes offered all of this. Bedford offered reliability and affordability. It wasn't that Bedford trucks were bad. They were excellent for what they were designed for. But the market was changing. Fleet operators wanted efficiency. They wanted vehicles that would last longer and consume less fuel. Long-haul trucking companies wanted driver comfort. They wanted safety features. They wanted modern truck stops and infrastructure designed for advanced vehicles. Mercedes understood this shift. Bedford didn't adapt quickly enough. The biggest blow came in the mid-1980s. Bedford campaigned hard for the British Ministry of Defence contract. They wanted to supply the standard 4-tonne 4x4 general service truck for the British Army. This was a massive contract. Thousands of vehicles over many years. Guaranteed income. Military prestige. Bedford's truck performed equally well in tests against the Leyland DAF candidate. The British Army even expressed preference for continuing their relationship with Bedford. But the contract went to Leyland DAF. While politics played a role, the Bedford M-Type was essentially 1960s technology. The Leyland DAF 45 series was significantly more modern, with better fuel economy and driver ergonomics. Bedford's failure was as much about their failure to innovate as it was about political decisions. For Bedford, this was devastating. They lost a guaranteed revenue stream. It signalled that even the British military didn't believe in their future. If the home market wouldn't support them, what hope remained for the global market? General Motors looked at the numbers. Bedford was losing market share. The company had no viable new designs in development. Mercedes, Volvo, Scania, and DAF were taking customers worldwide. The oil crisis had exposed Bedford's weakness. The company couldn't compete on technology. They couldn't compete on efficiency. They could only compete on price and simplicity, and that market was shrinking. GM made a decision. They would withdraw from the Bedford truck business. In 1986, General Motors announced that Bedford would stop production of all commercial vehicles. The Dunstable plant would close. The company that had operated continuously since 1942 would shut down. In 1987, Bedford's core heavy truck business was divested as AWD Trucks Limited, purchased by David J.B. Brown. The AWD name stood for all-wheel drive. The Bedford brand continued on light commercials only, badge engineering on smaller vehicles based on Vauxhall, Opel, Isuzu and Suzuki designs. These weren't real Bedfords. They were just rebranded commercial vehicles from other manufacturers. The decline accelerated. AWD Trucks struggled through the late 1980s and early 1990s. The failure wasn't just a collapsing market. It was trying to sell 1970s designs like the TL and TM against brand new competition. The Mercedes SK and Iveco Eurotech were revolutionary. AWD had nothing new to offer. By 1989 and 1990, the British truck market virtually collapsed. AWD went into receivership in 1992. Marshall of Cambridge bought the remaining brand. They continued making military trucks for a few more years. Production finally ended in 1997. In 1990, the Bedford brand was officially retired. In 1991, the last commercial vehicles rolled off the production line. By 1998, anything that remained was rebranded as Vauxhall. 58 years after its founding, Bedford was gone. By 1989, Mercedes launched the SK and MK series. These trucks represented another generation forward, bigger cabs, better ergonomics, even more efficient engines, more advanced electronics. The company never stopped innovating. Mercedes had achieved global dominance through engineering excellence, strategic acquisitions, continuous innovation, and market expansion. They didn't destroy Bedford through some corporate conspiracy. They destroyed Bedford by being better at what Bedford once was. Bedford's failure wasn't about making bad trucks. It was about stopping innovation when the industry demanded constant improvement. It was about standing still when competitors were moving forward. It was about depending on the past when the future required new thinking. From 1932 to 1986, Bedford dominated. They had 40 years of success. But success can breed complacency. The company that invented reliability forgot that customers also wanted efficiency. The manufacturer that built simple trucks didn't invest in advanced engineering. Mercedes understood something Bedford forgot. The future belongs to companies that never stop improving, that never become satisfied, that constantly invest in technology and design. Mercedes wasn't content being just another truck maker. They wanted to be the best. They acquired competitors. They built new factories. They hired brilliant engineers. They pushed forward relentlessly. In 1969, Bedford led the world. By 1986, they were finished. That wasn't defeat by a superior competitor. That was being surpassed by a company that wanted it more, worked harder, and never stopped believing they could be better. The lesson is simple. In business, standing still is moving backward. Mercedes proved it. Bedford learned it too late.